Are UFOs connected to extraterrestrials, or are UFOs and extraterrestrials in two entirely different camps? This is something I've been wondering about a lot lately, ever since Thomas and I have been talking to people about both subjects, about UFOs, aliens, disclosure, fairy folklore, lights in the sky, demonology, all of that. It really makes me wonder if the lights that people see, the manifestations in the sky, if those are part of fairy folklore, and then extraterrestrial life, is that part of something entirely different? Who's to say that the lights in the sky that we're seeing have anything to do with beings coming from another planet, coming from space even, and visiting the planet here? I don't think that the two have anything to do with each other. Yes, UFOs and lights in the sky probably have everything to do with interdimensional beings, whether you call them the fairies, the jinn, ghosts, demons, whatever you want to name them. That's one group of entities entirely. And then an entirely different group of phenomena, I would say, is extraterrestrial life, where there are so many planets out there that could potentially host life similar to human life or even other forms of life. And I doubt that any of that has to do with lights being seen in the sky and spaceships arriving here on Earth. I think that there's a connection being drawn there that's probably been fed to us through the media and through social engineering over the last 70 years or so. Now, what brings me to this point is that ever since we talked to Ben the other day, I've just been thinking about the idea that human life probably once existed and maybe still exists within the inner planets of the solar system. I would really wonder if, if we were to send out our own independent space probes that were privately funded, what we would come back, like what videos and audio they would come back with if we sent one to the moon, to Mars, to the various moons around those planets, to our moon. What would we see? And it really makes me wonder. I've thought before that there would be megalithic structures left over on Mars, megalithic structures on the moons of Jupiter, on the moons of Saturn. There's the Iapetus, the one that looks like there's a moon that looks like the Death Star, and it even has a little ring around the equator of it, and a big crater that looks like the weapon on the Death Star in Star Wars. So I just really wonder if there was life in space beyond Earth, if it would look just like we do, if it would have slight variation in muscular structure based on the gravity of the planet that the life forms lived on, if there was slight variation in the hue of skin and the type of skin, the structure of the nose, depending on how the atmosphere was on the planet. If there was a heavier atmosphere or a lighter atmosphere, I'd imagine that the sinus system would be entirely different from one planet to another, but still look close enough. As much variation as there is in cats, for instance, compared to, the amount of variation there is between dogs. With dogs, you've got all kinds of different breeds. Within house cats, you've got all kinds of variation of color and subtle variations in facial structure, subtle variations in body structure, but they're all basically the same, cute little house cats. And I'd imagine that us humans, there's probably, we can see the amount of variety that we have here on Earth. Who's to say that, all the different, races or all the different variations of the human race might have originated someplace else? That's kind of something that I wonder about, did we all end up here on Earth from other parts of the solar system or the galaxy, the universe? I like that idea more than some of the evolutionary theories that people have put out there. I mean, yes, there will be evolution as people have children together and genetic lines cross, and we have interbreeding going on. But it really does seem like there might be root variations of each type of the human race, and if they, if those bodies originated from a different planet that had, like I said, a more gravity or less gravity, a thicker atmosphere, a thinner atmosphere, it would account for some of the variations we see between people. But again, this is just something I wonder about. I'm not I'm not going out there and saying that any of this is fact or even that I know what I'm talking about with this. It's just questions that I've had recently about it. But the one that's, I keep coming back to the last few days is this idea of there being ruins on other planets. And I don't know if there are any remote viewers here watching this, but it would just be interesting to see, what happens when we remote view Mars, or what happens when we remote view our moon, or Iapetus, or Venus, the surface of Venus, the surface of Mars, any of these. What images would people come back with? And I've done a little bit of remote viewing work before with sketching. I don't have a tremendous ability with it, but I would imagine there might be some of you out there watching this that do have greater ability than I do with it, and I'd really be interested to see what you come up with, whether you draw when you remote view or it comes to you as a stream of consciousness. I would be interested to see what comes to you about the surfaces of these planets and moons, and maybe even some of the larger asteroids, like this Oumuamua, the giant space turd, that they I think they're deliberately making it look like a giant piece of shit, so that nobody looks beyond the fact of how ridiculous it is. I think there's something to be said for the fact that the more ridiculous the media makes something look, the more they don't want you to look into that thing. So you just dismiss it. And there's definitely something Freudian or something about making a Oumuamua look like a giant turd. I've heard people say that it might be some kind of solar sail that might only be the thickness of a piece of paper, or something like that. But it's definitely something. I don't think it's just a floating accident out there that happened to come in and then make a course correction in there. So I think we talked about this with Ben the other day, that is that something that we humans put up there in a previous civilization? I personally think that civilization goes in a big cycle, and something happens, a great cataclysm occurs at the height of a civilization and knocks our species back to the Stone Age, or even before then. And all written material, all written history, unless it's set in stone, literally, is destroyed. And even the stuff that's set in stone gets knocked over and destroyed, melted. All of the different things that we've seen with the different megalithic structures, and the written language on some of these stones, megalithic structures. The language may become lost if civilization gets wiped back to the Stone Age, and people become functionally illiterate again, because they're just trying their best to make it from sun up to sundown without freaking dying. So I would really wonder if civilization gets up to a certain level of collective evolution. Perhaps we become spacefaring. We make our way out, colonize our solar system. Maybe we've gone out beyond our solar system. Maybe we originated from someplace outside of this solar system, or even within it. I don't know. I really do wonder if that's the case, that if there is extraterrestrial life again, does it look like us? Is it us? Are we the extraterrestrials that ended up here on Earth? I would think that there could be something to that, because we're the only the human body, the human animal, is the only one that can't walk on its own right when it comes out of its mother's womb. And there's so many other things that separate us from that separate our bodies from the rest of the animal kingdom. So that just makes me wonder again, did we originate from here, or did we come from some other place and end up here, and we're stranded here on the side of the road again, like the idea of the isolated Polynesian cultures. Perhaps at one point they were all part of one large society, and a cataclysm occurred, and they were all separated off from each other, and over a couple of generations lost contact with each other. And the same kind of island life concept, I think, could come with planets. If suddenly there was a gigantic cataclysmic event that wiped out life within a solar system, or within the galaxy, within whatever locality that the planets are in, that they would all be isolated from each other, and it would only be a matter of time where the knowledge of our cousins on other planets would be lost and potentially ridiculed. With the types of orthodoxies that arise and the types of dogma that arise. The dogmatic principles of thinking that our current civilization is the only advanced civilization that's ever existed, and everything has just gone in this linear progression as far as the collective human evolution. That right now we're at the pinnacle of it, and everything before us is loincloth wearing savages who could they couldn't make art, they could barely even find clothes to put on. They had to wear a damn leaf over their junk, so it again, I wonder if there's a cataclysm that occurred, if we're isolated off here on Earth, and maybe there are other pockets of people even throughout this solar system that we as civilians don't have any idea about, but maybe there are people within the control system, within the control grid, that are aware of other human life existing. Are there still humans on Mars, for instance? Are there still humans on the moon, even? And is there a reason, if there were people there, is there a reason why they would keep that information from the public? Perhaps because their entire house of cards would just fall over, because the paradigm would just be completely shattered. So we've been talking about disclosure a lot, that in UFOs and everything being as common as whatever. It's incredibly common stuff nowadays, but I wonder if the disclosure thing might have something to do with this very idea that there's other human life out there that looks just like us, speaks a language very similar to ours, and has been isolated from us since the last cataclysmic cycle, whether that was 12,000 years ago, 24,000 years ago, even sooner. Who knows? I'm not going to peg a date on it to say that I know what I'm talking about with any of this, but these are just questions that I've been wondering about. These are topics that have been really on my mind the last few days, ever since we started talking about this stuff in the symposium. So anyway, those are just my thoughts about it. A few questions I wanted to put out there, and see if anybody else has ever thought about this kind of thing before. Again, I'm no expert on this. I'm just a guy with questions. This shit fascinates me. I think the idea of human life existing on Mars, on our moon, on Iapetus, I think that's really cool. And I think that the whole idea of extraterrestrials and UFOs probably don't have anything to do with each other. Yes, there's interdimensional life, and that probably has nothing to do with extraterrestrial life. There might be some crossover there. They might be dealing with the same interdimensional forces that we're dealing with too, and maybe there's something to that. Maybe there is an interdimensional force that caused the great cataclysm, that wiped out life within the solar system, or life within this corner of the galaxy. And that's why all of this is so hidden and so suppressed, is because of some sort of interdimensional force that came through and slipped out somehow into the physical and destroyed life everywhere. And maybe this is maybe Earth is the backup drive, the way that you can hook up an external hard drive to your computer, save an image of your computer, of your operating system and everything to it, and then if your computer takes a shit, or you spill a beer on it and you need to get another one, you go buy another computer, hook up your backup drive, and essentially reincarnate your old system onto a new machine. And I've wondered that before too. Is the civilization, the flora, the fauna, everything, all life on planet Earth, is it the equivalent of a backup drive? Did shit get wiped out everywhere? And was this like the reinstall, if you're on a Mac, like the whole time machine thing, if you can take things back to a certain time and then restart it again? Are we in something like that? Is that, does that explain some of the Mandela effect stuff that occurs, the residue from that? To me, it seems like there would be some sort of technology that could do that with DNA and genomes to be able to reactivate a strain of DNA and get it quickly reanimating itself somehow. Again, I'm not putting out anything saying that this is how it is. This is just the shit I wonder about at night. So again, that's the idea I'm wondering about too. Is this extra dimensional life, the stuff that occurs within various ancient texts about some sort of evil force coming here and messing everything up. Is there some truth to that? Does it not come from the stars necessarily, but does it come in between dimensions? I know that there was the Art Bell call on Coast to Coast years ago where the guy allegedly was an Area 51 worker. He called in to Art Bell totally frantic and said that they're not extraterrestrial, they're extra dimensional, and that whole thing was debunked and all of that. But is there some truth to that? If there is a malevolent force out there that has it out for the human race, or that has it out for all life in general, I doubt that it's going to be coming from the stars to come fuck things up here. I would imagine that it's going to come, between this reality and the reality of the fairy folk, somewhere in there, in between dimensions. If the fairy folk and the jinn and all of them live in one reality that's kind of superimposed into ours, and there's an overlay there, I would imagine that whatever this malevolent force is, it would come between those things somehow. It would show up, between stations on the radio dial, on the edge of the coin between one side and the other. The break in between, right before dawn, before the sun comes up, and again before at the end of the day, right before sunset. The Terminator points, on the edge of the coin, so to speak, in between dimensions, on the edge of the piece of paper. It would find a way to insert itself in between realities and possibly physically manifest itself. Possibly it could take over the bodies of humans, the bodies of animals. It could, we've all heard about walk-ins before, not Christopher Walken, but another life force walking into a human body and taking over. I like David Omen's analogy about you as the soul, or you as the being, whatever you want to call it. You are the driver of a car, and your car is the body. So if you imagine yourself in your body the way that you would imagine yourself in a car, if someone else comes along and jacks your car and either forces you to get out of the driver's seat and takes it over, people will still see your car driving around, but it's not you. And the same kind of thing occurs with a walk-in. Somebody could come jack your body and take it over, and all of your friends and family see your body walking around, but someone else is driving it. Or maybe you've been pushed into the passenger seat or in the back seat and you're still in there. And this is how I think, if there was an interdimensional malevolent force, how it would operate within the physical reality. It would come in and take over people when they are in compromised states, whether psychically, physically, spiritually, finding people who don't have a strong grasp on the wheel, so to speak. If you're driving through a really bad part of town, you don't want to have, your windows down and, driving at 5 miles or at 2 miles an hour while there's shady people walking up to your car. And it seems like the kind of world we live in right now, we're kind of going through territory like that, where things are really shady and we're driving through a really bad part of town really slow with our windows down and the doors unlocked, ready for basically anybody to come by, open the door and throw you out of your seat because you're not wearing your seatbelt. It really wouldn't surprise me if we're at that point now. We've kind of talked about the whole invasion of the body snatchers concept, or Thomas has talked about it a lot. And I wonder if, some of the, as people will say, NPCs, if they are self-driving cars, how Teslas and all that shit they can go around and drive themselves. Is the NPC phenomena, are there human bodies that are essentially automatons that are self-driving cars? There's no person behind the wheel the way you and I are people behind the wheel driving our body, so to speak. Are there Teslas out there driving around with nobody touching the wheel, nobody touching the pedals, just waiting, going 2 miles an hour through a really bad part of town with the windows down and the doors unlocked, just waiting for something to come along, open up the door, get in, and take over control. That would make a lot of sense to me. What do you guys think about that? I'm definitely keeping an eye on the control specimens, if you want to use that term, to see, when do they all start vibrating together and start acting weird? Because, that's when I would imagine this thing is all going to go down. But again, I think with like any invasion, there's always going to be a preliminary wave that comes in before there's ever a full-scale, attack. So there would be sleepers, I think is the term. You would have sleeper agents and scouts coming along before, the infantry shows up or before the stormtroopers even show up. The preliminary invasion waves are just going to be onesies and twosies here and there. Scouts, like I said, people that are undercover, so to speak, that are trying to blend in to the surroundings as to not give away the fact that there's an invasion going on. And then at just some point there would have to be a full scale, you send in the Marines, so to speak. So if that were to occur, I would imagine one day there'd be a large group of NPC types that just suddenly activate and start acting very strange and start doing some very dangerous things. I'm not sure what it would be, but I think it's safe to say that when we all see it, we know that that's the case, that, we're being invaded by these things. Again, I'm just asking this as a question. I'm not saying that I know any of this. I'm not saying that any of this is true. This is just the shit I think about sometimes, and wanted to share my questions with you. All right, that's it for now. Thank you very much.